Hey, Mike here, been testing the Cube Stereo Hybrid 140 HPC SLX 750. It's got a really long name. It's very similar to a bike that I tested last year, but in a way it is completely new. So let's get into the review below. So this Cube Stereo Hybrid 140 HPC SLX 750 not only has a really long name, but that model name is very similar to the Cube Stereo Hybrid HPC 140 Pro that I tested last year. But to be honest, it is a completely different bike on the trail. The biggest change that you'd notice if you're going over the spec list is the change to the Bosch Smart System motor, and that has brought a few important changes to how the bike rides, especially in geometry, and the bike itself has a few notable upgrades in the parts as well. So I'll go over that as we go through the review. This one sells for $92.99. It weighs 24.4 kilos, so it's a fair bit of bike, but that's also because it's got a 750 watt-hour battery, which weighs about 4.4 kilos on its own. So let's take a closer look at this Cube Stereo Hybrid. It is called the 140 because it's got 140 mils travel in the back, but it's matched with a 150 mil travel fork, which is a bump up in fork travel from the model I tested last year. As I said, it's had a bit of a bump in componentry over the whole bike. Still got a carbon mainframe and alloy swing arms, but it's got a Shimano 12-speed group set. Bit of a mix. It's got some Dior parts in there, such as the shifter and cassette and chain, but it's got the nice high quality 4-piston XT brakes with big 203mm rotors on there too. Cube have got the Acid cranks on the Bosch drive unit. They're 165mm with a 34 tooth chainring. You've got a Newman set of wheels, so it's a 30mm internal rim on Newman's really nicely rolling hubs. They still didn't come with proper tubeless tape on there, so I had to add some on. So tyres on this are 2.6 Schwalbe Hans Damps. Great tread pattern for this bike I've found. I've really liked them, but the big upgrade compared to the bike I tested last year from Cube is the casing, being the Super Trail casing in Tubeless Easy. Set up no problems tubeless, and then it's also got a harder compound on the back and a softer compound on the front. So I've actually found them to be a fantastic set of tyres the whole test. Held air and didn't let me down. Suspension wise, we've got a Fox 34 e-mountain bike model on the front. So that's just got the grip damper on there and the Evol air spring plus rebound adjust as well, and then we've got a performance DPS Evol on the back. So one thought I had at first was that maybe the 34 was going to be a bit undergunned on a 24.5 kilo e-bike at a 150mm length, but I'll just check through to the review later on to see what my actual thoughts about that were. Finishing kit is fairly standard. We've got a 150mm dropper post, some in-house brand parts for the bars and stem, and interestingly, the cable routing goes into the top of the headset cap, or right in the spaces below the stem. It's super neat. Some people won't really like it. I find it can be an entry point for water into the frame with some designs, but this particular setup has been pretty reliable so far, so that's a thumbs up from me. So compared to the Cube Stereo Hybrid I tested last year, one of the big changes here is the Bosch Smart System. So the motor itself is essentially the same. It's still the Performance CX Generation 4, but the Smart System brings a whole host of changes. One of them is a 750 watt-hour battery. So it's bigger, it's got more battery life, you can ride further, or you can keep it in a higher mode for longer. But what a lot of people may not realize is that the bigger battery has forced a lot of brands to make their bikes longer and sometimes restrict the sizes. So in this case, last year the Cube I tested had a fairly short 457mm reach, whereas this has gone up to a 473mm reach in a large, and still with the same back end length of 457. So it's still quite long in the back, but that's great for stability. But at the same time, it's longer in the front, which is also better for stability as well. This bike does come in 4 sizes. I'm riding the large, it goes up to an XL. The small runs 27.5-inch wheels, whereas all the others run 29-inch wheels. So more about the Bosch Smart System. There's a few components that really make the difference here. So yes, it's got the 750 watt-hour battery, but it's also got a far better head unit with the Kiox 300 and the Bosch Smart LED mode controller. One of the differences here is I could get rid of the Kiox 300 head unit completely and use my phone for a lot of the details that I want to get. Plus there's the LED indicators on the mode selector which tell me what mode I'm in, how much battery life I've got, and you know how the system's running. It mightn't be flashing at me if the bike's actually locked through the Bosch app, which is a really handy function if you are leaving your bike while ducking inside to get something at the shops. The Bosch Smart System has a few modes in there, very similar to the Purion display that was on the bike that I tested last year. You've got the Eco mode, which I don't use that often. It kind of negates the weight of the bike. Then you've got Tour Plus, which is a dynamic mode. So you know, if you're not putting much in, it won't give you much assistance, but it'll go up to a fairly high level of assistance. And then you've got e-mountain bike mode, which I think is probably the mode most people should use. So you can get a full turbo level of assistance. So that's like 360% assistance, but only if you're putting in a fair bit of effort. So it will match what you're doing, and it's probably one of the better ways to get the most battery life out of your e-bike without having to think about it and stressing about it. And then you've still got the kind of turbo setting there. If you just want full noise all the time, you can use that. I found when I was riding it, I used either Tour Plus or EMTB Plus the most. I descended in EMTB and rode open trails in that, but on tighter switchback climbs, I preferred the Tour Plus setting. One of the big benefits with the EMTB mode is the extended boost, and this is something that's pretty unique to what Bosch do. Essentially, when you back off pedaling, you can get an extra little burst of speed or assistance even though you've had to stop pedaling, whether it's to clear a feature or just to set your pedals for a jump. So if you're coming in to line up a lip for a small gap that you want to do, on some e-bikes, you'd stop pedaling and it feels like somebody's hitting the brakes on you. With the Bosch system using the extended boost function, then you do that, you still got that little bit of assistance, so it doesn't feel like your speed that you've hit to hit the jump has dropped off, which is kind of a little bit dangerous. Another real benefit of that extended boost is, one of the reasons we get an e-bike to help on the climbs. So if you've got a step up, again, the same thing, you don't want to stop pedaling and have the assistance drop away completely. So it can help you get over like those larger technical features. And that's where you see it in things like the Enduro World Cup in the e-bike category with those power stages. It's perfect for undertakings like that. So if you've got an e-bike that you really want to master some crazy technical climbs that you just wouldn't really be able to make it up on a regular bike, you would love extended boost. Personally, where I live in Brisbane, we don't have a lot of particularly technical climbs. That's why I preferred to use the Tour Plus setting on the climbs, which was dynamic, but not so punchy that it was just going to cause me to need to brake on the way out of corners. Well, it's kind of fun going fast. It's not the best and most efficient way to ride your bike. So one of the benefits of the Bosch Smart System is the Bosch Flow app. So you can see I've got the cube connected here. My ride's paused because we were out doing some photos and videos before. So as I said, I can get rid of this display and use the smartphone as a display if I wanted to get a mount to do that, using like a quad lock or something similar. You can check the battery life, the expected range in the setting that you're using. Obviously I can customize those modes as well. So you can see that the e-mountain bike mode is a dynamic mode, so you can't really change that one. It is more about being able to change the eco if you want to bump up the level of assistance there. Obviously you can't change the max speed above 25, but if you wanted to speed limit it just to get a bit more out of it, you can. And you could do the same with the torque if you really wanted to drop that back down. And you can do the same in turbo too. So if you wanted to use turbo more but make it how you wanted, you can do that there. There's a whole lot that you can do in the customization. What you can also do is use it to map your ride. obviously it's just getting the maps on board there. And this is also where you can do things like any of the hardware, or sorry, the firmware updates for any of the components here. And what is really handy is using the the Bosch Flow app lock. So there's an e-bike lock. So that operates from your phone. When you turn it on, it'll be locked, or you can set the lock. And if your phone's not nearby, it's not going to unlock. Great bit of extra security. So I guess the big question is, how does this bike ride? For what might seem like some small changes compared to the 140 HPC Pro that I tested last year, the changes on the trail are incredible. That bike I got along with. It was a nice bike to ride, it was fun, but I found it was lacking in the tyres and the fork and the geometry for how I wanted a 140mm e-bike with a high quality motor to operate. This bike, the 140 HPC SLX 750, completely changes my opinion of the Cube stereo hybrid. The longer reach means that I find that it's a little bit more balanced. It's not crazy long at 473mm in a large. It's pretty moderate, but it's just right for this bike. And again, the 10mm extra in the fork travel, that's not amazing, but it's a better operating fork as with the Float 34 with the air spring on there, and just with some great damping characteristics on there as well. And the wheels too, having some reliable wheels that are strong enough for e-bike use and with casing that's strong enough also makes a huge difference. So on the trail, I found this bike was incredibly fun to ride. The geometry with the longer reach than the previous model, the 66-degree head angle, 75.5-degree seat angle, I found it was really balanced. So that means that when I was climbing, it was nice and agile to get through tighter, twisting single track climbs, getting up and over obstacles as well. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too short, but also hitting jumps, which I don't do that often, but I was more comfortable to do on this e-bike compared to the Cube that I ran last year as well. I also found that the Cube that I tested last year was a bit nervous, probably because of the length in extended rock gardens and down steeper chutes, whereas this bike's been really steady and a lot more fun to ride and feeling a lot more capable. One thing that I've noticed with the suspension as well is that it is a pretty linear rate. So if I look at some other kind of 150, 140 e-bikes that I've ridden in the past, including bikes like the Trek Fuel EXE, they're a pretty firm bike. Whereas this one's quite supple at the top of the stroke. So it's not a coil spring in there, it's a Fox Float Evol. But it just meant that it soaked up trail chatter really well while still having that rising rate on bigger hits just to not blow through the travel. And that was really good. I was actually really impressed with how well it pedals and how well the rear suspension works. Again, it's got a 3-position rear shock, so you can firm it up if you need to, but I just didn't ever need to. I found that it pedals efficiently enough for how you pedal an e-bike, which is sitting and spinning, that it rode well as is. I did expect that I would feel a Fox 34, even though it's an e-bike, Fox 34 might be a bit underdone on a bike that once it's got its pedals on it is 25 kilos. And I think if I was a bigger rider and wanting to really push the limits of the bike, I'd probably prefer if it was a fork with slightly larger legs. This is an e-bike fork, so it does have the thicker walls and the stanchions, so the stiffness is there, but I think that could be something that if I was looking for 140mm travel with a 150 fork e-bike to just go rip on, maybe you'd want a little bit more fork. Personally, for the trail riding I was doing, it was absolutely fine and did not stop me having fun on this bike at all. In terms of downsides, there's a couple, but they're just really minor things. One might be the fork, and depending on what you're looking at, that could be a big one. But for me, I wouldn't mind a longer travel dropper post at 150. I think there's room to have a little bit more drop in the frame, but that's probably about it. I look at the bike, it is over, it's 24.5 kilos. It's not light, but it rides really nicely with a very centered and balanced geometry. And I think compared to the Cube that I rode last year, which is $7,500, it cost a fair bit less. It is a completely different bike and really, I guess, suiting the moniker of a trail hunter, which is what Cube give it. So I guess our take on this bike, or my take, the Cube Stereo Hybrid 140 HPC SLX 750 has a really long product name, and it is an exceptional trail e-bike. So 750, it's got the 750 watt hour battery, which is, you know, absolutely massive and should get you all the range that you need. I never emptied the battery on one ride. I was out for 3 hours using e-mountain bike the whole time, and I still got home, I think, with just under 60%. So it really is going to depend how you ride, but that won't be the limiting factor. I think probably the limiting factor is what you want your e-bike to be. If you're after a trail e-bike around that 140 mil of travel that can take you places, you can find new trails, you can enjoy the up, the down, the along, this is a great style of bike to look at. Now, if we add in the value that you get from the Cube range, then I think it really starts to stand out. So $9,300, you get the carbon mainframe, the alloy back end, a reliable group set throughout, and a top-notch Bosch Smart System assistance package on there. I think it's probably going to be hard to find a better value e-bike that wraps all that up into one package at around $9,000. And I'd really recommend going to take a closer look at one. I looked at it on paper, I didn't think it looked that much different to what I tested last year, but the small changes around geometry, the Bosch Smart System, and a few of the component choices have made this a completely different bike, and one I'd highly recommend if you're looking for one of those kind of mid-travel e-mountain bike trail bikes. If you've got any more questions about the Cube, just drop them in the comments below, and obviously I'd just remember to like and subscribe so you catch all of our video reviews right here on YouTube.